I'm Richard Bavor. I've been a surgeon for almost 20 years. It's the only thing I've ever really wanted to do. Mostly, I operate on cancer patients. Surgery's not pretty, but at least it offers a chance of cure. This is the sharp end of cancer. Most patients I treat ask the same question. What could I have done not to get cancer? And I have to admit, I just don't know. I've lost friends and loved ones to cancer too, and I see the suffering it brings every day here at work. No one's to blame for getting cancer, but we can all reduce our risk. I've decided to explore the other side of the cancer story, prevention. 1 in 3 of us will get cancer at some point in our lifetimes. What would it take to improve those odds? In this episode, we'll explore how the environment can influence our cancer risk. We'll uncover the secrets of healthy old age and dissect the risks of our chemical world. We'll question our sun worship and discover how our first contact with the world can impact our health. The environment plays a crucial role in cancer prevention. I'd like to get a sense of how not to get cancer. The sun makes life on Earth possible. It gives light, warmth, and enables the trees to make the air that we breathe. Our sun worship is a long love affair, and I, for one, am loyal. I love the sun, and I get out as often as I can. But the sun is a deadly source of radiation and one of the leading environmental causes of cancer. We can feel how strong the sun is, but to really see sun damage, you need a different sort of filter. Here at Piha, we're employing some shock tactics. Behind me is an ultraviolet camera. It lets us see how we look deep down.
Wow.
Wow. The camera can see the damage that's not yet visible to the naked eye. It's like a crystal ball that can see our future faces. Freckles that are yet to come out, wrinkles and spots.
I never thought that I have so many freckles.
Have you spent a lot of time in the sun?
Yes.
Do you wear a hat?
Not as much as I should.
This is my mum.
It's pretty scary, especially through here where,
Oh, yeah.
you know, it's obviously the most around
That's where
here.
it gets exposed the most, isn't it?
Absolutely.
This is how we all looked once. But it's not about beauty, it's about health. This is what happens when you put sunblock on. It completely blocks out the ultraviolet light that causes sunburn. Now you're completely protected from the sun. Just 5 bad sunburns before the age of 20 more than doubles your risk of melanoma. Young skin is at its most sensitive because it's still developing a defense system, and your body remembers the damage. This is why skin cancer can show up years later, which worries me because I've been burnt a lot. New Zealand has one of the highest melanoma rates in the world, even though it's not one of the hottest places on Earth. But it is positioned near the ozone hole, which started growing dramatically towards the end of the 20th century. The ozone layer is the thin blue line of the atmosphere that surrounds the planet. It's fragile, and it's crucial for life, blocking out 98% of the sun's harmful rays. In New Zealand's South Island, scientists have been studying it for decades. The National Institute of Water and Atmospheric Research has been tracking the changing state of the ozone layer.
Ozone protects us from ultraviolet radiation from the sun. If there were no ozone in the atmosphere, there'd be so much UV you couldn't live outside and life would have developed very differently.
So the ozone layer is like a sunscreen for our planet.
Yeah, that's a very good description of it.
So this here is our balloon. It's made of a natural rubber.
The team released balloons into the upper atmosphere to measure the thickness of the ozone.
So this will just gradually fill up.
In the early 1990s, we noticed that the ozone was being depleted by chemicals called chlorofluorocarbons. These CFCs were banned by an international treaty called the Montreal Protocol.
So 3, 2, 1, go.
This successfully helped reduce the hole in the ozone.
If we hadn't had the Montreal Protocol, by now the UV levels would be, say, 20% higher than they were in 1990. And that is important for skin cancer because people have calculated that for every 1% change in ozone, skin cancer rates go up by 2 or 3%. That means the skin cancer rates caused by the UV now would be 50% higher.
The Montreal Protocol is an inspiring success story of the world coming together to mitigate a global environmental problem. However, damage done to skin can mutate into cancer decades after sunburn. It's important to keep an eye on changes to your skin. Some things to look for are changes to shape. Is the mole ragged rather than regular? Size, bigger is badder. And colour, is it smudgy rather than consistent? I'm embarrassed to admit that I've never had a melanoma check. So today, I'm going to be examined by Dr. Anthony Tam, who's a clinical advisor to the New Zealand Melanoma Foundation.
Right there. And how long has it been there?
As long as I can remember, really. Probably at least 10 years.
I'm going to pass my light over it. This is a dermoscope, and I can see that there's pigment centrally, and it's quite pale towards the periphery. It also has hair growing out the middle of it, which is a reassuring sign. Certainly no features of melanoma, so it's a beauty spot.
Beauty spot. Nice. I'll show you this other one.
Yes, let's have a look. It's quite a good illustration of something called the ugly duckling sign. So that's whereby if somebody has something that looks different from all their other moles, then that could very well be the melanoma. And what I can see here are some very regular globules. It looks like the surface of a brain, if you can imagine that. There are also some little comedonal structures or little cysts, and that all adds up to something that is benign. So not cancer,
great.
not cancer.
Yay!
And whilst it's not typically taught, I have seen squamous cell cancers arise from these. So if you would like me to treat that, then we can do that right now.
Sounds good, get rid of it.
This will sting. So you ready for this, Richard?
Yes.
Here we go. So
Bit stingy, but not too bad.
It feels great to be given the all clear. The first defence against skin cancer is to keep a watchful eye on our own bodies. In a sense, we all have to be our own doctor. And if melanoma is detected early enough, it's one of the most curable forms of cancer. Ironically, when you're enjoying the Earth's cleanest air, the sun's UV is often at its harshest. Here at the edge of the Pacific Ocean, I'm breathing some of the cleanest air on the planet. But it's hard to believe just a few hundred metres from here, the air pollution rivals that of some of the world's major cities. Air pollution causes cancer, and unlike smoking, it affects everyone. Tiny particles in the air lodge in our lungs and can cause lung cancer. Those particles are created by pollution such as heating, traffic, and dust. Today, I'm going for a stroll through downtown Auckland with pollution expert Dr. Ian Longley. So we're on the edge of Auckland, but we're also on the edge of the Pacific Ocean. Nothing between us and South America, essentially. Cleanest air in the world, right?
Well, that's what my machine's saying.
Yeah.
It's recording about 3,000 particles in every cubic centimetre of air.
Yeah.
So that's actually incredibly clean. There's very few places elsewhere in the world in such an urban setting were unable to get measurements that clean. We take a walk through the city, we'll find that the numbers change dramatically. As we're sort of coming to the end of the wharf now, the numbers are starting to go up.
Oh, now we've just totally walked into the curtain, haven't we?
We just got a moment there, a momentary measurement of 20,000. So that was probably a plume of smoke coming off one of these ferries, and we just walked right through it.
What's in these particles that causes cancer?
So the main thing will be soot coming from burning diesel fuel. So it's just tiny particles of carbon, which we now know that they can be carcinogenic. Our body has not really evolved to deal with these.
They go right down into the very base.
They go all the way down to the base of the lung where the gas exchange occurs. And even then, they're small enough to even go out of the lungs and into the blood system. And once they're in the blood, they can affect any organ in the body. So now we're measuring consistently 15 to 20,000 particles per cc.
Is that bad? Is that a high number?
I wouldn't call it clean anymore. We're certainly getting into an area where I'd start to call it polluted.
Those old buses, like you can tell the slightly older model, every time they go past us, it's like someone did a big fart all over us, doesn't it?
We don't have to go that close.
Oh, 70, 100,000. What a dirty, party old bus. It's just spewed particles all over us.
You can certainly smell it, but the instrument can see tens of thousands of particles coming up as well. It's a real shame you can't see the pollution. If we could all see the pollution coming out of vehicles, we'd behave completely differently.
Shouldn't we be cutting back on diesel engines?
Yeah, we absolutely should. There are certainly cleaner engine technologies. Electric vehicles are becoming, commonplace and viable. So if we adopt them, it'll make a big difference.
By dealing with diesel, we'd be taking away most of the cancer risk from air pollution.
We'll certainly be removing the largest cancer risk. Yeah, absolutely.
What's good for the environment is good for us. We can see from the measurements down at the wharf how clean our air could be if we remove diesel. But there are other environmental carcinogens that constantly surround us. I like California. It's sunny and warm, the people seem happy, a lot of them are healthy and active. But there's a jarring thing about it, and that is all the little signs warning me about cancer. Proposition 65 is a law that aims to protect the citizens of California from cancer by requiring businesses to erect signs informing of a cancer risk in the environment. The penalties for refusing have cost companies thousands of dollars. These signs are everywhere. The California Environmental Protection Agency is responsible for administering the law.
It's about making people aware of the chemicals they're exposed to in their daily lives and pointing out that there may be chemical exposures you might not have known about.
So what kind of carcinogens might be in the environment around us now?
You're seeing probably carcinogens in vehicle exhaust. You're going to find Prop 65 warnings in most groceries, restaurants, bars. There are about 900 chemicals on the Prop 65 list.
Who is Proposition 65 protecting?
I like to think it's protecting all of us. But when I think first to that question, I would say children. Children are particularly susceptible to environmental chemicals.
It's like a kind of a subtle pressure bearing down on groups who are producing these things not to.
Right. It provides information people can use to make their own informed choices, but it goes beyond that in that it encourages businesses to respond to the pressures of the marketplace, to respond to public opinion. Nobody wants to have to display a warning that says their product causes cancer, and if they're able to make the product safer by reducing or eliminating exposure, they'll do it because they know that's good for business.
In response to consumer demand, Proposition 65 has seen a reduction in toxic air emissions and caused many businesses to reformulate their products. Lead has been removed from baby powders. Mercury has been removed from nasal sprays. Toluene and formaldehyde from nail polish. And the world's largest soft drink companies have removed a toxic chemical colouring from their beverages. However, hazardous chemicals are still widely used in the commercial production of many fruit and vegetables. Farm workers who use these pesticides, like market gardener Travis, are advised to suit up to protect themselves from coming into contact with these potentially harmful substances. How long have you been on this farm?
All my life, mate. I was born here and I've been living here ever since.
Part of farming these days is using pesticides, and I guess it has been ever since you were a boy.
That's right, yep.
Do you feel dependent on the use of pesticides in your type of farming?
Reliant on them to grow a product that the retailer expects.
Andrea Timanager is a cancer epidemiologist researching whether pesticides used in agriculture are a cause of cancer.
There are a number of pesticides that are used on a regular basis that are suspected carcinogens. None of them are known human carcinogens at this point, but what we found in multiple studies that have been done in New Zealand is that people who work in the agricultural sector and use pesticides have an increased risk of certain cancers, including non-Hodgkin lymphoma and leukemia. There are a number of mechanisms in which we suspect that pesticides could cause cancer. One of them is they could affect the immune system. The other is they could cause DNA damage directly. We don't have the direct link at this point, but we really see that people who use pesticides have an increased risk of cancer, and the pesticide use itself is the strongest hypothesis we have.
Andrea's research tested the urine of 100 farmers who used pesticides, including Travis, and a control group of 50 people who didn't use pesticides.
We did find that people that use pesticides have higher levels of pesticides and pesticide metabolites in their urine.
What does that mean in terms of their risk of non-Hodgkin's lymphoma?
Well, on an individual level, we never can say, but on a group level, we have found that people who use pesticides on a regular basis have an increased risk of non-Hodgkin lymphoma, and it can be twice the risk than the general population.
Are you aware of the link between pesticides and increased risk of cancer in farm workers?
No, not until you told me today.
Do you think many other farmers are?
Oh, I don't know, probably not.
Travis fortunately had low levels of pesticides, but the study found small amounts in everybody tested.
Most of us are exposed to pesticides, but these levels are really, really low. Another thing people in the general population probably should be aware of their own use of pesticides.
Yeah.
So what do you have in your shed and how do you use it?
This is what safe practice looks like in the suburbs. I've never seen anybody dressed like this to spray their veggie patch. But it's a frequent safety precaution mentioned in the fine print of many garden chemicals. I prefer a more organic approach to gardening. But what's the story inside the house? We spend about 70% of our lives indoors. One of our most important environments in terms of exposure is our homes.
There are a whole load of chemicals in the home. Let's take an example of bisphenol A, which is a chemical a lot of people know in plastics. It's abbreviated to BPA. BPA interacts with receptors in the body, and these are molecules that cause cells to divide.
But if it's a cancer cell and it encounters BPA, it'll push it to grow faster.
Yeah, that's spot on. But BPA you'd find in a lot of things in the household, two places particularly. One is in plasticky sort of boxes that you might take your sandwiches to work in. That's probably not a huge issue because that won't transfer into your sandwiches. But if you decide to get something from a takeaway and it's in a plastic box that might contain BPA, then you put it in the microwave to warm it up. That heating process liberates some of the BPA and it will then move into your food.
What are the alternatives?
Yeah, I mean, you can use glass. And, you know, in my household, if ever we microwave anything, we put it into a glass container and then microwave it. It's absolutely safe.
I hate flies. and I use fly spray.
If you look at the sort of chemicals that you use in fly sprays now, the most common are the pyrethroid insecticides. So they're broken down in people and the environment to a series of other chemicals, and they will promote the growth of cancer cells. But now that doesn't mean we shouldn't use fly sprays. Because if you're in a household and you've got a kitchen bench like this, and you're cooking your food here, a fly landing on that food is much more problematic. You're much more likely to get a bacterial infection that'll make you very ill. The fly spray will have very little effect on you.
What about cleaning products, Ian?
The detergent that cleans your plates is probably a very little concern in terms of risk. In the home, you're very, very, very unlikely to find any chemicals that are absolute human carcinogens. The ones that cause cancer in animals and are reasonably expected to cause cancer in humans are highly regulated, and you're very unlikely to find them too. But we want to reduce our risk, and that's what we should be doing. We should be minimising risk.
One of the big unknowns is the impact of a cocktail of chemical exposures. But if you're keen to avoid as many chemicals as possible, you could use the tried and true natural cleaning mixture of lemon juice or vinegar and water. And be aware that some bacteria are actually good for us. Our first environment is the womb. The passage from womb to world gives us more than life. The journey through the birth canal transfers billions of bacteria, fungi and viruses from mother to child. These are collectively called our microbiome and are implicated in asthma, allergies, obesity and cancer. This colonisation at birth means we have more microorganisms inside us than we have human cells.
Oh my God. Did it again. Aren't you amazing?
This microbiome has been with us since the dawn of evolution. Over 1,000 different species live inside our gut. We once assumed that we were 100% human, but now we know we are not alone. Almost half the cells housed inside our bodies are alien, and they are communicating with us in ways that could be helpful or harmful to health. Are we more microbiome than we are human?
Richard, almost. There are as many bacteria in our microbiome within our gut as there are cells within our bodies. And for those of you who jump on the scales most nights, take off 2 to 3 kilos because, in fact, those are your gut microbiome and not actually you.
Babies born vaginally receive a helpful dose of microbiome when they enter the world, but babies born by caesarean section miss out on this, and instead their microbiome is formed by their first contact with the outside world. They are primed to receive bacteria from anything that touches them. Research has linked C-section babies to increased risk of asthma and chronic immune diseases. Caesarean babies are also more likely to become obese, which is a major risk factor for cancer later in life.
What we want to know is if children born by caesarean section are given the microbiome of the mother, will that ultimately prevent obesity? One of the reasons for doing this is that if indeed that is effective in terms of creating colonisation, that is a very simple treatment to actually introduce during a caesarean section.
How does the microbiome relate to obesity?
The gut microbiome breaks down waste, and fibre, which leads to an additional 300 odd calories a day. Some bacteria are pro-inflammatory, so they can lead to inflammation, systemic inflammation, which leads to obesity. They also send signals that increase fat formation, and they also have an influence on our brain and our appetite.
So it's possible that there are a group of bacteria inside my gut that are kind of tweaking my brain, sending little signals to my brain that might influence what I choose to put into my diet.
That's possible. I suspect the first thing that we want to better understand, which has been proposed, is do they make you feel hungry to eat more? So next time you have a hamburger, who made the decision to have the hamburger? Was it you or was it your gut bugs?
While science further investigates the differences in the microbiomes of babies born through caesarean section, some people are taking matters into their own hands and doing DIY vaginal seeding. This involves swabbing the baby with their mother's vaginal fluid, and midwives like Gail are increasingly being asked to do this by parents having planned C-sections. Gail is personally interested in preventing obesity.
I've struggled with it myself all my life. I had weight loss surgery 15 months ago. I've got children with celiac disease, weight issues, allergies, and I don't want that for other babies and mothers. So when I started to read about the microbiome and how we can prevent allergies and asthma, autoimmune diseases, possibly even cancer and obesity, then I figured it's such an easy thing to do and we should be doing it for as many as we can.
So here's a picture of the body. Where would we find some bacteria, do you think?
Ashley is expecting her third child by caesarean, and she's asked Gail to come and help seed the baby immediately after birth. I've tagged along to get a better understanding of why this is becoming a popular practice.
So this is going to be your one, okay? This is actually a vaginal tampon. So what you're going to do is the morning of your C-section, go to the toilet, empty your bladder, and then you're going to prepare yourself with this. Okay, you just need to wash your hands normally. It doesn't particularly need to be sterile because lots of non-sterile things go there and it's all fine. So this tampon works a bit differently. You have to roll it yourself. Okay, so just roll it up nice and tight and then insert it how you can, as far up as you can, and then leave it there until we get to the hospital. Okay.
What do you think is the benefit to the baby from the vaginal seeding?
From the bit of research that I've done, there's sort of a growing belief that microbiome matters. And it's very different for a C-section baby than for a baby who's born naturally. I had emergency C-sections with my first two. So however I can stack the odds in favor of the baby.
You ask any person having a baby, mother or father, if you could give your baby the gift of possibly not getting cancer later on or becoming obese, would you do something for it?
Are you ready to have a baby?
Yeah.
A girl?
I know.
It's rare in medicine when emerging science and popular practice converge. Vaginal seeding first gained popularity after research showed that it might reduce a child's risk of asthma and allergies. But it's controversial. The Royal College of Obstetricians do not recommend it because there is a small risk of not just passing on the microbiome to babies, but passing on infection. The microbiome is right at the cutting edge of investigation, and Gail's really stepping into an experiment here. The microbiome is really fascinating, but it's very, very new. And that's why, I kind of have a degree of skepticism and interest in what's happening here today.
So I'm just removing the swab that has been in Ashley's vagina for about 4 hours before we got here, and it's got all the lovely stuff that we want to rub all over baby, and we're now going to swab the baby and seed her.
But I'm struck by how cutting-edge science can be so simple in practice.
All finished. You are now seeded. One beautiful and well-seeded baby. Hello, beautiful.
That's it, Gail.
That's it. It's that simple.
Simple.
Yep.
Microbiome in an individual is established very early on in life, from almost the first few moments, first few breaths in a baby's life. Can I, at 49, do anything to change my microbiome?
You can. The first thing that you can do is you can change your lifestyle, which won't completely change your microbiome, but it can make it healthier. We know that if you have a healthy diet, reduce fatty foods, higher fibre, less sugar, more leafy green vegetables, exercise regularly, get plenty of sleep, all of these lifestyle effects can improve your gut microbiome and the diversity of your microbiome. Those are the things in your life you can change.
There is an environmental cancer risk that is everywhere, but which most of us are unaware of. It's to do with the consumer world we live in, and it's shaped by advertising, urban planning, economics and legislation. The Royal Australasian College of Physicians has now classified obesity as an environmental disease, and it's to overtake smoking as the leading cause of cancer. Yet, we're led to believe that fat is our fault. Professor Boyd Swinburne is a world expert on the toxic food environment. He even coined a word for it, obesogenic. Have you worked out your order?
Luckily, I ate before I came, but if you came here hungry...
Quite hard to resist.
Quite hard to resist, that's how they're designed.
How does an obesogenic environment contribute to people being fat?
If the environment is full of stuff that's going to make us fat and is purposely designed so that we really like it, it's hyper-palatable, it's low cost, it's advertised, it's everywhere, then we respond to that environment. Nobody wants to be fat. But if it's all around you, then it just kind of creeps on year.
One of the things that's in common to cancer patients and obesity patients is that they blame themselves.
They do.
Is being fat our fault?
Well, you hear this a lot. People say it's just personal responsibility. But then the point I put back to them is, are we getting more or less personally responsible for our health? And if you look at a whole lot of health behaviours, drink driving, smoking, safe sex, we're actually getting better. We're getting more and more responsible as time goes on. Why? Because the signals are there, the price is there, the requirements, the regulations and so on. So we naturally want to be healthy and we follow that and we are becoming healthier, except for this area, except for obesity. And that tells me that we're not controlling that environment the same way that we have been doing for these other public health problems.
It has to do also with our kind of genetic predisposition to get fat too, doesn't it?
Yep, that's true. But people have been looking for genes for a long time to explain obesity. And you get all those genes together that are shown association with BMI, and you stack them up and they add up to about 2% of the variation. If we'd put as much effort into sequencing the human environment as we did to sequencing the human genome, we'd have a much better understanding of obesity. Some of these areas are what we call food swamps, where there's a high density of unhealthy food outlets, and they're concentrated, as you might expect, in the low-income neighbourhoods. Chicken nibbles and a cup of chips for $6.
It's hard
That's
to beat,
pretty
isn't
good.
it? I'm loving the deep-fried chicken smell. My little rat brain is going...
Is it?
Finally broken.
You've cracked?
Cracked. Our behaviour is governed by a process much stronger than willpower. In 2007, the University of Bordeaux ran a unique study. It discovered that a group of rats had a drug of choice. It usually comes in a white, crystalline form, and it gives an unparalleled hit: sugar. What's remarkable is that they preferred sugar over cocaine. Sugar activates the same hedonistic circuits in the brain, the same area that is rewarded by drugs, alcohol, and sex. It's the pleasure centre. This study showed the rats had little control over their desire for sugar. If they are surrounded by it, they will choose it, and humans are no different. The drive to consume sugar can be so potent it overrides willpower. But children are particularly vulnerable because they have the least control over their own environment. Even if children eat a healthy school lunch, they're tempted by toxic food the moment they leave the school gates.
There's no doubt that if children are obese and they stay obese into adulthood, which is often the way, that you're increasing their risk of cancers. And there's a concern that this might be the first generation whose life expectancy is actually lower than their parents.
In a groundbreaking study called KidsCam, researchers from Otago and Auckland universities put wearable cameras and GPS units on 168 kids and tracked their every move for 4 days. The study revealed that children are being bombarded with an average of 27 junk food advertisements every day. Where is the solution to the wider problem of obesity in society?
We've got to think of ways to radically change the environment in which we live. There's a few things we can do quickly and easily. We can make sure that schools have healthy food policies and early childhood centres as well. We can start taxing sugary drinks. We can make sure that healthy food is available and affordable, and we can limit the marketing of unhealthy food, particularly to children, but really to everybody.
Denmark became the first country to implement a sugary drink tax way back in the 1930s. But only now, in the 21st century, has this thinking really started to spread across the globe, with 5 countries, including the UK, Ireland and South Africa, passing new laws on sugar in 2018. As a tool for cancer prevention, taxes have proved successful for smoking. Could it have a similar impact on obesity? The island of Okinawa in southern Japan is known to locals as the land of the immortals. It's one of a handful of locations in the world where people live long, healthy lives. These magical spots are called blue zones. People here don't deliberately try to avoid cancer, but those who live the traditional Okinawan way are some of the healthiest and oldest people in the world. Japan has more people living into their hundreds than anywhere on earth.
How long have you worked here?
60 years she's been working here.
60 years, since you were 18.
So from 8 to 8, 12 hours she's working.
Every day? You're very strong. Do you know anybody who's had cancer? Never go to the hospital?
No.
Always helping. Do you know many people that have had cancer? No?
No. My friend, my 가족, 동물학생,
No one?
No one.
Compared to Westerners, the older Okinawans are a quarter less likely to get breast or prostate cancer and have half the risk of colon cancer. What feels really remarkable about wandering around this market is how visible older people are. They are socialising, engaged in their communities. Most of them look really healthy. They look as if they're enjoying themselves, and remarkably, many of them are working. What I don't understand is why so few Okinawans get cancer. Cancer is primarily a disease of old age, and that's because our cells have spent a lifetime splitting and replicating. The average body makes billions of new cells over a day. The older we are, the higher the chance that one of these cells will go rogue and turn into cancer. Dr. Makoto Suzuki is an 86-year-old cardiologist who is responsible for the remarkable discovery of Okinawan longevity.
About 40 years ago, I came here from Tokyo. At that time, I'm very surprised. So many active and healthy centers in Okinawa. Why? People are very healthy.
You've come into contact with over 3,000 centenarians.
Yes.
What are the things that you found that explain the longevity of the population here?
4 factors: physical, mental, social, and spiritual.
Dr. Suzuki is clearly driven. As a doctor, I'm inspired by him. Here he is approaching 90, and he's still actively working as a doctor, seeing and treating patients in a hospital. Dr. Suzuki says that the Okinawan longevity is based on 4 main principles. They have a sense of purpose, called ikigai, a reason to get up in the morning. They have tight groups of lifelong friends called moai. They eat a largely plant-based diet that's low in calories, and they stay physically active as part of their everyday lives. And they take that ikigai principle from youth to old age. Fujiko-san is 100 years old. She lives with 5 generations of her family, and her ikigai comes from her role as matriarch. Fujiko, why are you in such good health? What have you done in your life to make you live so long?
なんでかね。
Yes.
美味しいのいっぱい食べる。
Good diet? Yeah. At 100, what does your family mean to you?
いっぱいいるのが嬉しい。うちにいっぱいいたら嬉しい。学校来たら2人とも降りてきて私と遊ぶ。
楽しい。
私と遊ぶ。私と。
Do you know anybody from your generation who's had cancer?
え？何？
がん。
え？
がん。
え？
がん。
あと。わからん。
Doesn't even know what it is. Diet is thought to be one of the most important factors contributing to the absence of cancer in older Okinawans. Emi-san runs a local restaurant specialising in longevity cuisine. Her menu is based around the staples of the traditional Okinawan diet.
背景はそのなんてなんていうか元気な長寿者が先生でその方たちからお料理を教わってつないでます。
The traditional Okinawan diet, like the Mediterranean diet, is high in vegetables and low in meat and dairy products. On average, Okinawans eat 3 servings of fish a week and plenty of whole grain and soy products. Traditional Okinawans have a self-imposed habit of calorie restriction. They subscribe to the Confucian teaching of harahachi bu, which means eat till your belly is only 80% full.
It seems clear that the Okinawan way of life has a force that's more than the sum of its elements. Certainly those anchors of community identity and shared purpose are probably important to living a life that's long and healthy.
The Blue Zones show that longevity is about public health and public infrastructure, getting the whole city moving in a healthier way and making the healthy choice the easy choice. What strikes me is that the people of Okinawa bring together all the elements of cancer prevention we've explored in this series.
The idea that a blue zone helps me with is it kind of breaks down all the elements that keep all our cells on the right path. What we eat, how we move, how we live, how we interact with each other. And that somehow keeps us on the narrow pathway to health.
Cancer is created by a collection of influences coming together, but equally cancer prevention is a cocktail effect that keeps those forces at bay. Our diet, lifestyles and environment all play a crucial role in maintaining a balance for each of us. What I've learned is that simple changes can pave the way to a longer, healthier life.
Wednesday, have we got a surprise for you?
I brought your trunks.
You'll definitely need those to live here.
The lounge is the swimming pool.
But one person's paradise...
I want to love.
...is another's nightmare.
I want to list.
So with that...
May the best man win.
Kirsty and Phil's Love It or List It, Wednesday on 1 and on demand.